Hello and welcome to the Collapse Experiment. So, there's been a couple of videos popping up on YouTube talking about never go back to your old town or your old job. And this is true from my understanding, my experience. So, my old town, I grew up in Kalamazoo and I lived there until 2020. Not the whole time. A couple years I lived in Portage. If you live there, you know there really is no difference between Portage and Kalamazoo. These two towns are right next to each other. They intermingle. You cross a street and you feel like you're in the same place, right? Doesn't make any sense. You cross Kilgore Road. Even one of Kalamazoo's high schools, in my opinion, is technically in Portage. It's on the other side of the border, but somehow Kalamazoo owns the property. I don't understand it. So, I was watching a video the other day by a woman. She's in her early 30s. I think she currently works as a bank teller. She used to be a nurse. She left that job because of what sounded like workplace violence and harassment against her. Gotta know how to word this stuff, especially if you're considering talking to a lawyer. Once you say a couple different things and you've got instances to back it up, all of a sudden everybody's wanting in to cash in on this lawsuit. So, she's talking about how she's in her early 30s. She's making $12 an hour as a bank teller. I don't know where she lives, but my advice to her would be move. Seriously, like move. If this is the same place that you've been living in always. When I moved from Kalamazoo up north to the Cadillac area, I immediately started making more money than I did at any job I had in Kalamazoo. And it wasn't hard, and currently I still do, working 2 part-time jobs. There's a lot of benefits to living in a smaller place. For one, nobody makes assumptions about you because of what they know about your past or who your family is. Like, it's a clean slate. It's one of the reasons I never ended up joining the military, was because my stepdad was already in the National Guard. And I know a lot of those guys bounce around from like active duty, or maybe they transfer to some other branch. But all the guys I ran into that served with him were like, first of all, they didn't know I was his kid. Then when they learned that I was his kid, they were like, how the did you grow up in that house? And then the immediate response afterwards was, he is a bleeping bleepity bleep. And then some guys would be like, I'm sorry, I know that's your blah blah. I'm like, no, I completely understand. Like, you're not telling me anything I don't already know. So that closed that option for me. And then with the work history, for one thing, economies are different everywhere, not just by the state. So, an example I gave beforehand was I used to work at Bronson Hospital. And the last year I was there, they gave me a 5-cent raise. But I was already topped out on my pay. So, instead of getting 5 cents more per hour that I worked, they took my full-time hours and were going to give me a lump sum check of $100. That was my raise. So I started going online and doing some research. I found out the same job at Spectrum, just north of Kalamazoo and Grand Rapids, which Bronson was always trying to compare itself to and make it sound like we were such a better place. The same job was being paid $19 an hour as opposed to the 12 I was making. When I brought this to my boss, he immediately said, well, Grand Rapids is a different economy. But Kalamazoo and Bronson Hospital really wants to be Spectrum and Grand Rapids. And you can't claim that fame if you're not paying for the quality of help you want to have here. And that was when I quit. That was when I left. I was like, first of all, it took 14 years for me to max out, which usually takes like 7 to 8, right? So it already took twice as long because of the number of financial setbacks, 2008, reclassification of jobs, just a ton of crap. And then what ends up happening is I go somewhere else immediately. I end up working for Kazo County, and the starting pay there to do less work than I was doing at the hospital was the same amount of money that I left. So really, I was getting the same pay to do less work during the same shift for basically the same insurance as well. But there was a ladder I could go up. The local hospital was paid less than the local county government. That just blew my mind. An award-winning hospital couldn't compete with the county. And if anybody's ever worked for a local county anywhere, it's not great. Like, really, their funding depends on taxes, and if property value goes down, they're screwed. So, one thing that me and my wife discovered moving up here was that a lot of the jobs that she always desired in Kalamazoo where the door was closed to her, right? Because unless you know somebody, you're not going to get it. And those jobs tended to be handed to people that somebody higher up already knew, whether they're qualified or not. This is just the reality of politics, especially when it comes to government jobs. We move up here, and she immediately finds a job in the county that we live in that pays more, that is part-time, and she absolutely loves it. And one day I asked her, I was like, would you ever have gotten this job if you're in Kalamazoo? And she's like, no. And for some reason in this area, the jobs that she wanted, there's a short supply of. People either don't have the experience or the education to do it. Like, for example, one of the things she does is she processes FOIAs. And, she's got to learn, she has to work the equipment, she's got to know the laws, like what needs to be edited out or dubbed over, and faces that need to be blurred. And the county could not find anybody to do it. The local township can't find anybody to do half the stuff that they need done. And a lot of it's just really easy, stupid crap. Half the time when they give me a call, because I'm not like an hourly employee, it's more like they call me up and say, hey, somebody dumped something on the side of the road, could you go get it and put it in the dumpster? I get in my truck, I go over there, they pay me for an hour, it took 20 minutes. The simplest stuff. And a lot of the people up here that are doing these things, like the township board, the county commissioners, they're aging out. and nobody below them in age wants to do the job, has any interest in it. So, just by simply moving to a new area, and I don't know if this girl is single or not, but good Lord, it's like all of a sudden you're adding to the local gene pool and everybody's interested. That's another thing I noticed. If you're new to the area, because everybody around here went to high school with everybody else, they all know each other. They really don't want to date each other. If they didn't date in high school, they don't want to do it later. So, all I'm saying is that just by moving, a bunch of doors open up, more opportunities. You're going to find that there's shortages in a lot of different things. And if you're able to fill that in, not only do you get more money, they're actually grateful for you being there. So, I've had some jobs where they're just dicks. But that's just the type of job that it is. So, not surprised. You're still going to have that. But, like my one job that I do maintenance, like they're glad that I'm there. And sometimes like some of the things that they bring to me, I'm like, oh, this is going to be less than 5 minutes. But for everyone else on the staff, it's an issue. And then I think my wife has the best example where it's like, just from her previous experience, and all of a sudden, like I think now she's taking over as the zoning ordinance until they can find somebody else. It's pretty amazing. So, one thing, I have no plans on going back to Kalamazoo. I know at some point I'll have to because my wife still has a house there. And there's really only like 2 things I miss there. The record store, which now Cadillac has a record store, but that was one thing that I missed. And the Asian food market, Pacific Rim. That place was amazing. It was the first place where you could actually sit down and have a nice restaurant style quality bowl of ramen. And the amount of stuff that they sold there was insane. Everything from Japan, Korea, Malaysia, Chinese. Like the freezer section was like going to a zoo. Not in a bad way. I'm not saying anything like the cough came from there or anything like that. If you wanted fresh blue crabs, they got them in like once a week from Chicago. Like stuff like that. It was pretty amazing. You could get frozen eel and grill it at home. The people, I can go to a Meijer and not worry about bumping into anybody I went to high school with or anybody I worked with at a previous job, anybody I dated. So that's another stress-free grocery shopping. Plus, I will say, the housing market. Moving to a place like here, now we're not in Cadillac. I don't know what the housing market's like in Cadillac, but the property we bought was just over, slightly over 100K. That was what we bought. But then if you look at the property, and if it was downstate, even if it was just outside of Kalamazoo, you're looking at like 300-400K. It's insane. So when we saw that, it was like, holy crap, like we could never afford that down here. And we got things to work. job-wise, financially. So you don't have to keep living in the place that you're at, especially if you're freaking miserable. And if other people are telling you, like, things are not better elsewhere, that's because misery loves company. These are not your friends. These are not the people who have your best interest at heart. If anything, those people, if they are your friends, should be listening to you and maybe taking consideration as to what you're saying. Like currently, my wife has family that's looking at moving up here. Because where they currently live, they've always lived. It's all the same jobs. It's all the same people. But they come up here to visit us, and they're like, holy crap, everything is nice. And then they look at the property on like Zillow and stuff, and they're like, wait, we can own what for how much? And it's obvious. There's jobs and stuff up here. People survive up here. It's not a desolate wasteland like everybody in Grand Rapids and Kalamazoo wants everybody to think. So, never go back to the place that you're from. There's some truth to that. Like, there was a short period of time where I went to a therapist for about a year, and one of the things he suggested was, have you ever considered moving away? And I kind of took that at the time as like, oh, are you trying to get rid of me? Like you're tired of hearing about my issues. But I think it might have been some of the best advice that anyone had ever given me. And I had other people in the past tell me the same thing. People that moved to Kalamazoo, and then they see me and like where I'm at, and they're like, yeah, you're never going to get anywhere here because like this is a void. This is like, you know, people look at your education. They don't look at your talents. They don't look at what you know or what you know how to do. They look at you and they make judgments on other stupid shit from the area or from your family. And that's where you get stuck. So, to those people, I wish I would have listened to them sooner. I can't remember their names. I can see their faces. Like there was one guy, he was really cool. He ended up, it was KC. And at one point, he got in contact on Facebook with an old girlfriend from France. I'm not making this up. And she's like, hey, me and my husband are getting divorced, and I keep thinking about you, blah, blah, blah. And this was a guy, he went to med school. I believe he dropped out of med school to move to France to be with her. Things didn't work out. He didn't go back to med school because he actually didn't like it. So the guy is very intelligent, but he's this funny wandering soul. And while he was in France, he made money playing blues music in like cafes and stuff. Because the French freaking love that shit. So he's singing these old blues songs in French, because he speaks French as well, of course. And then he ends up leaving the job at the hospital, which, come on, to be honest, it was a shit job. Like, he's riding his bike there. It pays like $13-14 an hour. He's single, by himself. So yeah, he bought a freaking plane ticket and he moved out there. And a couple years ago, when I looked him up on Facebook, he was back to traveling around doing blues shows across Europe. And he was still with that chick. So yeah, there's nothing wrong with moving. There's nothing wrong with trying to improve your situation. And you don't have to look at it as like, oh, you're just running away from... No. You're getting away from the things and the people that are holding you back. That's what you're doing. It's what a responsible adult does anyways. So, are there people I wish I could see? Yeah, there's some guys from high school that I'd like to have a conversation with. See how things turned out with them. Let them know that, back in the day they were a good guy. And I remember that. And I appreciate that. But other than that, like even the guys I used to hang out with, no. Like, I had no self-esteem back then. And even the people that I was hanging out with were treating me like shit. And I knew that then, but I didn't have the balls to put my foot down. So I'm glad I got out of that situation as well. Because I wouldn't say they were an influence on me, but they definitely brought nothing to the table. There was even one guy, he's now a tattoo artist, and we tried doing a comic book together, and I think he penciled 2 pages. And then weeks later, I'm like, hey, have you done anything else on that? And he's just like, no, And all he ever talked about was how he wanted to be a comic book artist. So I wrote this script, and I even did some doodles of page layouts, so he knew what I was looking at, and maybe he could improve it. And he could have been a very talented comic book illustrator. He still could. There's guys out there now that are independently publishing their own stuff and funding it online and everything. But that's not who these guys are. These guys, they looked at themselves as, my life is going nowhere. I know I won't accomplish anything. Why try? And then they wonder why they're at the place that they are at decades later. So, if you want to get ahead, you got to move. Keep moving forward. Move to a different place. Do the thing that you need to do in order to get to where you want to be. Keep on typing.